Jai Bhim and Namo Buddhaya to all of you. Today we will be conducting our second session on the course, which we titled as Babasaheb Ambedkar and Rhetoric, where we are studying the art of public speaking, of course, drawing on from the speeches of Babasaheb Ambedkar. But before we commence our session today, I would like to pay my respect to Shahu Maharaj, who enacted the first reservation policy today in 1902. So, paying homage to him, we will begin our session today. This is a presentation that I made for today. So last time we saw Babasaheb Ambedkar making an important speech in the Constituent Assembly. That was his first speech, and we have seen his power of public speaking in that speech, where he has convinced or created a consensus in a Constituent Assembly which was divided over certain issues, and we have seen those issues and how Babasaheb Ambedkar navigated through that first meeting, first speech of the Constituent Assembly, where he made a lasting impact on the members of the Constituent Assembly. And as I said, that is one of the speeches that turned the destiny of a country. It set the Constituent Assembly on the right path, path of wisdom, and the path of unity. And we have seen how Babasaheb Ambedkar has beautifully convinced the listeners or the audience of the House. So today I'm going to go further. I'm going to talk about some of the concepts in rhetoric, particularly from the point of view of the of Baba Saheb's way of making speech, and I'm also going to talk about, how Baba Saheb Ambedkar debated in the various contexts. And this today I was going to talk about the debate between Babasaheb Ambedkar and Gandhi, but I think before that we have to do certain things which are very important. So I postponed it to the third session, where we are going to look at the quality of a debater and a negotiator as Babasaheb Ambedkar was. But today I'm going to take you through how to debate like Babasaheb Ambedkar, how to make your points, how to put the ideas across. So this the title of the session today is how to debate like Babasaheb Ambedkar. And this debate, as we know, has taken place on various levels. Babasaheb Ambedkar has argued and debated with the British government, the British Empire, the British parliamentarians, the British praise. And in India, he has debated with Gandhi and Congress. There is a lot of material available on this. He has debated with the Sanatanist. There is a famous debate between Savarkar and Babasaheb Ambedkar about conversion. He has debated with Muslims, the minorities, and also he has debated and argued with the other scheduled caste leaders. And we know that we have seen that the word debate and the battle have the same roots. And it is not to win your opponent with the fist, as Babasaheb Ambedkar said, with violence or with a force, but with your power of persuasion. And how Babasaheb Ambedkar has done using the power of persuasion is a very deep studies. And I reckon that some of the scholars will undertake that kind of a study in the future. But here, to make the course conceptual as well as practical, pragmatic, I'm going to talk about some of the conceptual points and discuss about Baba Sahib Ambedkar's art of public speaking. So, arguing for democratization. So if we look at Babasaheb Ambedkar, his aim for the arguments or debates or dialogue or negotiation was to create a truly democratic society. And we know that people like Hitler and Mussolini, and even today the authoritarian leaders are very good orators. They invoke the emotions of the people. They know how to change the moods of the people, how to change the minds of the people and get them to do what might not be in their better interest. That we can see throughout the history that they were demagogues, they were retorts whose rhetoric was directed towards the negative ends. So the rhetoric is a very powerful device. You can use it to meet the positive as well as the negative ends. But when it comes to Babasaheb Ambedkar, it's very important for us to understand that his whole art of public speaking was directed at democratization of the society. And we have seen how deep he goes when he talks about democracy. And we have seen one of his definitions of the democracy was government by discussion. It is also called the deliberative democracy. And we have seen one of the three forms of the rhetorics. The deliberative rhetoric is all about, political rhetoric, is all about future, is all about choices, is all about public policies. And we have seen the rhetoric of the past, the forensic rhetoric, the judicial rhetoric, where it's about the past, where, who has done it, who done it, justice, injustice. And, we also know the demonstrative rhetoric, which is about blame or praise, and it takes place in the present. I have gone through it briefly in the last session. Some of the leaders use rhetoric towards negative ends. So all dictators do it. They are very powerful speakers. They know how to manipulate our minds. So understanding the theory of rhetoric is also important for us to decode the speeches of the demagogues, or to decode the speeches or the logic or the emotions that are invoked by the authoritarian, or fascist or Nazist, or for that matter, anybody who tends to create a very authoritarian regime, not the democracy. But in democracy, in the democratic way, rhetoric is all about convincing the other person, group, communities, and nations towards a positive outcome of certain policies. So the kind of rhetoric that Babasaheb Ambedkar has mastered, to it was directed at a very positive outcome. And as an orator, Babasaheb Ambedkar mobilized words towards human rights of the India's disadvantage. That was number one plank of his power of oratory, and the other plank of his oratorial goals was to truly create a democratic society. And we have seen how broad was the concept of Babasaheb Ambedkar. And in that broader concept of democracy, the art of public speaking, the art of persuasion was at the center of it. And one of the aspects of the democratization includes, as we know, the inclusion of all the sections of the society, neglecting, not excluding any section of the society, in the common pursuit for common welfare. And the deliberative rhetoric, in a positive sense, is directed at consensus. So you will see how Baba Ambedkar always tried to create the consensus. So in his speech, he talks with several constituency at the same time. He talks to his opponents, he talks to his supporters, he talks to the people in the position of power, and he talks to all different constituents, in a single speech. That's the beauty of a great speaker, where he knows the audience and the constituents of the audience, and how to appeal to the various, constituencies within the audiences. So you see, this is a very important concept that we have to bear in mind. And okay, so three pillars of Babasaheb Ambedkar's rhetoric I'm going to talk about, and we all know these words: educate, agitate, and organize. We know these words as the slogans, but we have to unfold a lot of conceptual underbearings of these words, like educate, agitate, and organize. So last session we saw three pillars of Aristotelian rhetoric, in which he talks about logos, ethos, and pathos. And I told you that these three terms are very important. The logos is all about making the logical appeal to the logic or the intellect. Ethos is all about making an appeal to people, through the character, or making people feel. It comes from the word ethics, ethos, and it has to do with the environment, how to blend with the audience, how to make them feel that you belong to them. That is a larger implication of ethos. And pathos is all about emotion. So how at different part in the speech, the speaker invokes the various emotions. And unless our speech has a capacity to invoke the emotions, it won't make people to do certain things. So I'm going to parallel that with Baba Saheb's three, I would say, pillars of the rhetoric or public speaking. So you see, there are these are the three pillars of persuasion: logos, ethos, and pathos. I have gone through that. Some of you who have not gone through the previous sessions, I urge them to go through it. So, education, as we know in Baba Saheb's, methodology, education is about making people think more than what they are capable of thinking at that moment. That is what Baba Saheb Ambedkar does. If you engage with his speech, we will see this quality in his speech, that he's always trying to make you think larger than what you are capable of thinking at that particular moment. So, educate is all about making people think, and you make people think through your logical and rational thinking. That is the part of the logos, to argue in such a way that people would understand the logic or the rationale behind it. And agitate, mobilize is about making people act in a certain way. It's about invoking emotions. So when you invoke the emotions, we make people agitate. So you see, agitation is not about just about going to the streets and demanding for your rights. When you make people, mobilize people to think more, to do something, to act in a certain way. That's also called the agitation and the mobilization. And we see that is underlying in all the speeches of Babasaheb Ambedkar. As I said, that it is one of the pillars of Babasaheb Ambedkar rhetoric. Agitate, mobilize is about making people act in certain ways. In other words, making them, emotionally, invoke them emotionally, or invoke their positive emotions, not destructive emotions. And organizing, or making a community, forming a community, is all about making people to forge into a community. That is the part of the ethos, to make people think that they belong to the single community. you know in other words, they belong to the single tribe, to use the word, tribe. And it's all about ethos and ethics. So you also bear in this mind, when you bear in mind three pillars of rhetoric as taught by Aristotle: logos, ethos, and pathos. In the Ambedkarite context, those words will be educate, agitate, or mobilize, organize, or form or build a community. So you keep these three terms in mind. I just try to keep a parallel between them, that you check any speech for the critical element. So whenever you study any speech of Babasaheb Ambedkar, you check Babasaheb's speech with these three critical elements: thinking, whether he's enabling you to think, acting in a certain way, action, and working together. I think these are the three elements which are very important when we look at these speeches of Babasaheb Ambedkar. And that is what he does through his speech. He, try to make you think more than what you're capable of. He's trying to make you act in a certain way, and he will try to bring you to work together. And that is the quality of Babasaheb Ambedkar's speech. And you see, these are, I just try to parallel the Aristotelian and Babasaheb's, pillars of rhetoric. Logos is educate, logic, making people think. In other words, it's about intelligence. How we can think more. Pathos is all about agitate, mobilize. It has to do with the emotions, and the emotions make people act. If you do not have the emotions, you don't act. You are a dry person. But if your emotions are high, you tend to act. It's also all about inspiration. So it's a real domain of the emotion, or what we can say emotional intelligence. And then ethos is, of course, about bringing people together, making them work together. It's about community. It's about organizing. So you see, all the speeches of Babasaheb Ambedkar has these three critical elements inbuilt into his speech. And as we are going to, study one of his speeches, we are going to see, I would request you to be mindful of these very important, elements in the speech of Babasaheb Ambedkar. So the speech, as I told you in the last session, in the last class, that the timing is very important. So we cannot just keep on talking without the context. So the context, understanding the audience, is a very critical part of the speech making. So timing, which is called kairos in the Greek language, and the context of the speech is very important. So the speech that we are going to study together, we have to understand the context before we go for the speech. So, Babasaheb Ambedkar, made his entry in the public life in 1919, and with a memorandum submitted to the South Borough Commission, where he is advocating for the representation or inclusion of the scheduled caste in the government. So at the time of Babasaheb Ambedkar, there were many contenders of power in the British India, as the British declared in 1917 that gradually the power will be transferred to the Indians. Now, why 1917? Because that is the period when World War II was going on, and the British needed India's help to, in their war, in the war against the Germany and Italy and other Axis powers that time. And they wanted to, lure Indians with carrots, saying that, we will give you the right to self-government progressively. And the contenders to the power, they included the British. Of course, they were in the power, and we have to argue with them. And the Congress, led by Gandhi and other leaders who were very hostile to the rights of the scheduled caste. And of course, the Sanatanists, they were very active from the beginning. The Muslims and other minorities like Sikhs and Anglo Indians. And of course, the princes of the princely states. That's a very important component of argument. And that's what we are going to see as to how Babasaheb Ambedkar also addresses the constituency of the princes of the princely states. India had more than 500 princely states. 560 princely states. They were all ruled by the princess, and they were part of the transfer of the power. And there were, of course, other leaders from the scheduled caste. Some of them were very anti Babasaheb Ambedkar, and they opened their own fronts under the aegis of Congress, or some of them were independent, but their job was to constantly oppose this great movement of Babasaheb Ambedkar, and also work for their own political power. And we know Babasaheb Ambedkar entered the public domain when the British declared in 1970, as I repeated in the first point, that they will progressively transfer power to Indians so that it will lead to self-government. So before 1917, if you ask for the self-government governance, it was not considered to be seditious. But prior to 1917, if any Indian asked for the self-government, it was considered to be the seditious act, and it was against the country. Now, the question after 1917 was really who will get power and in what proportion. So you see, we have to understand that after 1917, when the first Government of India Act came in 1919, it was all about who is going to get what. And that's how Babasaheb Ambedkar was negotiating, debating for the proportion representation of the scheduled caste. And Babasaheb Ambedkar demanded real and proportional power for the scheduled caste in 1919 throughout India, not just in the Bombay province. So before we go further, we have to understand that in the beginning, Babasaheb Ambedkar had made certain points very clear, and we have to bear these points in mind. He said, "I confess I have many quarrels with caste Hindus over some points, but I take my vow that I shall lay down my life in defense of our land." So that is what was the commitment of Babasaheb Ambedkar for India, and we will see he was much greater a patriot than any patriot of its worth its salt, including Gandhi. So, Babasaheb Ambedkar has talked about the rights of the citizens in the princely states, while Gandhi sided with the princess. He said, let the princess decide the fate of the citizens of their princely states. 563 princely states at that time. Babasaheb Ambedkar said, no, the people, the citizens have a right to decide the politics that they want. And here Babasaheb Ambedkar says that in the 1929 he says this, not later. He says in early in the beginning of the before roundtable conference, he says this: I am of the opinion that the most vital need of the day is to create amongst the people the sense of common nationality, a feeling not that they are Indians first and Hindus, Mohammedans, or Sindhis or Canary afterwards, but they are Indians first and Indian last. You keep this important thoughts of Babasaheb Ambedkar in mind, because that is how going to show you Babasaheb Ambedkar never wavered from his commitment to his country. He says, if social conscience is such that it is prepared to recognize the rights which law chosen to enact, rights will be safe and secure. But if the fundamental rights are opposed by the community, no law, no parliament, no judiciary can guarantee them in the real sense of the word. So his aim was ultimately to transform the society, not just to install a democratic government, because he knew that even if you have a democratic government, but if the people do not cherish the democratic attitude, there will not be any fundamental change in the society that one is living, and that is what we are seeing happening in our country today. So this is just to bring about the historical context to summarize what we are going to discuss. Study the speech of Babasaheb Ambedkar, understanding historical context and chronology. As I said, 1917 August Declaration, progressive rights of the self-government to Indians. Babasaheb Ambedkar submitted a memorandum to the South Borough Commission. 1919 Government of India Act, Montfort refers representation in the government even for the scheduled caste. Babasaheb Ambedkar achieved the representation for the scheduled caste, and in Bombay Presidency there were 2 seats reserved for the scheduled caste, and it was to be reviewed after 10 years. Hence, Simon Commission came to India, and Simon Commission totally included the parliamentarians from the British government, including the future Prime Minister of the Britain. His name was Attlee, who later became the Prime Minister when the power was transferred to India in 1947. So he was the part of the Simon Commission, and we know that's how Babasaheb Ambedkar knew people, personally, and that's how he could negotiate. So knowing people personally, knowing their minds, knowing their attitude is very important. And in 1928, Simon Commission came, which was also known as the Parliamentary Commission, which didn't include any Indians, because it was the Parliamentary Commission of the British, and they wanted to include the Indians in the discussion later. And Babasaheb Ambedkar gave evidence but did not sign the report of the provincial government. So every provincial government has to submit the report, and Babasaheb Ambedkar submitted his own memorandum, which I think Each of you should study it. It's in the part 17, volume 17, part 1 of the Constitution. The memorandum itself, the independent memorandum that Babasaheb Ambedkar submitted, is a piece of art. The language, the way Babasaheb Ambedkar advocates for the rights, not only of the scheduled caste, but he talks about the right to vote for everybody, adult franchise. And that was, he's one of the very important contribution to the Indian democracy is that, he was always arguing for the adult franchise, one vote, one man, one vote. And 23 October 1928, he gave evidence before the Indian, Simon Commission, and Simon Commission examined both at the central level and at the state level, examined Babasaheb Ambedkar. So, so Babasaheb Ambedkar differed with the committee of the Bombay province, and he did not sign the report and separated his own views and recommendation on 17 May 1929. And this is what he makes the public statement, which I repeated before. I'm not going to go into that. So, arguing with British, because the British, formed the one of the very important aspects of the power in India. The whole entire power was in the hands of the British. And how Ambedkar argued with the British, I'm going to show you through this speech. And I would like to request you to keep in mind following things while we study the speech. You try to understand, look at what are the logos elements, ethos elements, pathos elements. In other words, in the Ambedkarite context, you try to look at where Babasaheb Ambedkar is trying to educate, where he is trying to agitate or mobilize the people or the listeners, and where he is trying to create a kind of a unity among the listeners. And keep in mind the context and the timing. You, as I said, try to look at the logical arguments, emotional appeals, bringing people together. Also look carefully at the introduction of the speech, the narration, the facts, and based on that narration and facts, how he tries to convince you, make you believe certain things. And of course, the conclusion of the speech, which is called peroration. And also observe certain words, phrases, and sentences, and how we can deliver them with different tones. So it is not that you read the speech, flatly. And as I imagine, that speech was written by Babasaheb Ambedkar, and there were in the assembly, there were princes, there was Sayajirao Maharaj in the assembly, in the roundtable conference, the first session of the roundtable conference, which Gandhi didn't attend. And Babasaheb Ambedkar demonstrated his intellectual power in the first session of the roundtable conference, so much so that he was elected to the all important, one very important committee, the structural the federal committee. He was elected as a member of that very important, powerful committee, which decided the future of the politics in this country. So you also try to bear in mind that there were a lot of princes. There were people who are listening to him. There are the British Parliament. There is a British Prime Minister, and Babasaheb Ambedkar is delivering this speech in front of them. So just to create a lively picture, imagine Babasaheb Ambedkar, he look at stand like Babasaheb Ambedkar. This is very important. You see, while he is making speeches, he stands firmly like a mountain. You see, he's so relaxed. He's firm at the same time. He's relaxed. You observe these two, photographs of him where he's making a speech. You see his confidence. He's the way he stands. You see the way he looks at the people. You see the way he's comfortable with himself. That is the kind of the aura of a great rhetoric. So let's begin. Areshri, you are there? Are you there? Hello? So I would like, I don't know how many volunteers we got today, but some of you have, volunteered to read. So who is going to read?
Can I read, sir? Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Yes, yes, please.
Yeah. The need for political power for depressed classes, right? This is the topic, if I'm not wrong.
No, it's on the screen. No, whatever is to be read, it's on the screen.
Mr. Chairman, my purpose in rising to address the conference is principally to place before It's the point of view of the depressed classes whom I and my colleague Rao Bahadur Srinivasan have the honor to represent. Regard the questions of constitutional reform, it is a point of view of 43 lakh, 4 crore 30 lakh people, or one fifth of the total population of British India. The depressed classes from group by themselves, which is distinct and separate from Mohammedan. And although they are included among the Hindus, they in no sense from the integral part of that community. Not only have they a separate existence, but they have also assigned to them a statute which which is individually distinct from the status occupied by the other communities in India. There are communities in India which occupy a lower and subordinate positions, but the position assigned to the depressed classes is totally different. It is one which is midway between that of the start and the slave, and which may the convenience be called survival with this difference that serfs and the slaves are permitted to have physical contact for which the depressed classes are debarred.
Okay, thank you, Sangapal. This is the introduction of the speech. Now imagine that speech was delivered in the British Assembly, like in one of the palaces. This was this speech was delivered, and you can see that this is how Babasaheb Ambedkar makes a beginning. Sangapal, can you mute your mic? So this is how Babasaheb Ambedkar begins his speech. He talks about, in the beginning only, he talks about why he's making the speech, why he's addressing this conference. So he's very clear. He says that I want to put before you the point of view of the depressed classes. So you see the clarity. Whenever we speak, we should have a clarity. If we can communicate to the audience what we are going to talk about, it already makes them, receptive to the topic. And he talks about also the kind of on whose behalf he's going to talk. So he has attended that conference with his colleague Rao Bahadur Srinivasan, Rattamalle Srinivasan, another very famous leader, great leader of a community from Tamil Nadu. And he's saying that I have this honor of talk about or represent. You see how he's making in the introduction, claiming himself to be the representative, and he's talking about the constitutional question, constitutional reform, along with what the different classes have to do with it. And he talks about he's making his in a way he's creating his ethics or character, that he is representing the point of view of the 4.3 crores of the people of India, one fifth of the total population. So see, this is very important. So saying the number, you have to bear in mind whenever you make a speech, you can tell the number like for 4.3 crores or whatever crores. You can say that, but also when you make it, you state it in other words, like one fifth of the Indian population. That itself shows, number doesn't show what you are talking about. So sometimes we have to avoid the number. Whenever you state the number, you have to tell it in a way that people will understand what we are talking about. So one fifth of the total population of India is more concrete than 4.3 crores, because it doesn't make sense. Okay. And then he talks about depressed classes, and he says he talks about it as a distinct and separate from the Mohammedans. And he's also making a point that we don't belong to the Hindus, because we don't form any sense of community with them, because they don't include us in any of their social things. And before that, Baba Ambedkar has used another argumentative tools. He has already launched and shown through the Mahar Satyagraha that the Hindus are not willing to let the scheduled caste have this social indo-osmosis, let them have the access to the public tanks. And he says that not only how they separate existence, so he claims that the scheduled caste or the depressed classes have because that time the word scheduled caste has not come into existence. It came in 1935 Government of India Act. So he's talking about, we have a separate existence. He said that we have a different status, and look at the word invidiously. It's a very distinct word, distinct from the status occupied by any other community. And he says that there are communities in India which occupy a lower and subordinate position, but the position assigned to the depressed classes is totally different. So he says that they are in midway between the serf and the slaves, and this is what he kind of creates a kind of, in the very beginning of his speech, in the introduction, he states very clearly as to who he is representative, for what he is representative, and the status of the community is very interesting with the way Babasaheb Ambedkar has done it in the introduction. So who is going to read next?
I can read, sir.
Yes, Prashant.
What is worse that this enforced servility and bar to human intercourse due to their untouchability involves not merely the possibility of discrimination in public life, but actually works out as a positive denial of all equality of opportunity and the denial of those most elementary of civic rights on which all human existence depends. I am sure that the point of view of such a community, as large as the population of England or of France, and so heavily handicapped in the struggle for existence, cannot but have some bearing on the right sort of solution of the political problem. And I am anxious that this conference should be placed in possession of that point of view at the very start. The point of view I will try to put as briefly as I can. It is that the bureaucratic form of government in India should be replaced by a government which will be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. This statement of the view of the depressed classes, I am sure, will be received with some surprise in certain quarters. The tie that bounds the depressed classes to the British has been of unique character. The depressed classes welcomed the British as their deliverers from age-long tyranny and oppression by the Orthodox Hindus. They fought their battles against the Hindus, the Muslims, and the Sikhs, and won for them this great empire of India. The British, on their side, assumed the role of trustees for the depressed classes.
Thank you, Prashant. You see now how, I told you to observe the logic. I told you to observe the emotions. You observe the language as to how concretely he speaks about, about ideas and the things, So he talks about how, the untouchable suffer because of the, worse servility and bar to human intercourse. And he talks about not only the possibility of discrimination, but also denial of all equality. Look at this sentence. Look at this sentence. Not merely possibility of discrimination in public, but actually works out a positive denial of all equality of opportunities and the denial of the most elementary of the civic rights on which all human existence depend. You look at the way he frames the sentences and the way he might have delivered it. It's very important to look at how he uses the language. He says, I'm sure that the point of view of such a community as large as, again making it concrete, he talks with the 4.3 crores, he comes with 1/5 of the population of India, and then he talks about the population of the scheduled caste or the untouchables or depressed class as large as the population of England, as large as the population of France, and such kind of the magnitude of the population is handicapped in their struggle for existence. Look at the word, the struggle for existence. And you say cannot but have some bearing on the right solution of the political problem. And then he says, you see, now he's using the emotions. He said, I'm anxious to place before the conference this point of view from the very early start. So you see, he's bringing the urgency that how important, why it is important to bring this point of view in the roundtable conference at the early start. And he says that, you see, this is how he's arguing with the British. Imagine that now. So he says that, he is not in favor of the bureaucratic form of the government, because there is no democratic form of the government, only bureaucracy is running the British India. He says that he is not for that. He is critical even in 1930s of the empire. And he's saying that it should be replaced, and what it should be replaced by, very clear. See, the one hand, what he doesn't want, and on the other hand, what he wants. This is also the way of speaking. So in a single sentence, he says that this is what he doesn't want. What he wants is government of the people, by the people, and for the people. He's talking about democracy from the very early start in his intervention. He's saying that this is what he wants, and he is now coming to convince the British. He's saying he's trying to draw the relationship between the British and the depressed classes, and that is what is important. He says that the depressed classes fought for the British to win this subcontinent, and the British thought that they are the trustees of the depressed classes. Now let's see what happens next in the speech. But this is how now he's appealing to the British. So who is next?
Sir, may I?
Yes, Siddhi, please.
In view of such an intimate relationship between the parties, this change in the attitude of the depressed classes towards British rule in India is undoubtedly a most momentous phenomenon. But the reasons for this change of attitude are not far to seek. We have not taken this decision simply because we wish to throw in our lot with the majority. Indeed, as you know, there is not much love lost between the majority and the particular minority I represent. Ours is an independent decision. We have judged of the existing administration solely in the light of our own circumstances, and we have found it wanting in some of the most essential elements of a good government. When we compare our present position with the one which it was our lot to bear in Indian society of the pre British days, we find that instead of marching on, we are only marking time. Before the British, we were in the loathsome condition due to our untouchability. Has the British government done anything to improve it? Before the British, we could not enter the temple. Can we enter now? Before the British, we were denied entry into the police force. Does the British government admit us in the force? Does Before the British, we were not allowed to serve in the military. Is that career now open to us? To none of these questions can we give an affirmative answer. That the British, who have held so large a sway over us for such a long time, have done some good, we cheerfully acknowledge. But there is certainly no fundamental change in our position. Indeed, so far as we were concerned, the British government has accepted the social arrangement as it found them and has preserved them faithfully in the manner of the Chinese tailor who, when given an old coat as a pattern, produced with pride an exact replica, rents, patches, and all. Our wrongs have remained as open source and they have not been righted, although 150 years of British rule have rolled away.
Now, you see, thank you, Siddhi. Beautifully read. You see, this is how this speech is made. He is now critical of the British government. He's saying that we were very having intimate relationship with the British. We won the empire for them, but this is our independent decision to oppose them. He's saying that it's not because of the fashion of the time that everybody is opposing the British. That's why we are opposing. He's saying that no, it is not the case. This is our independent decision. It has nothing to do with the Congress. And he's now analyzing the what the British have done to the untouchables. And you see, this is how you speak. You raise the question, and the question are self answerable. Raising the question itself answer what you are trying to get answer to. It's a very important tool. It's a very logical tool. You see that like this. Before the British, we were in the loathsome condition due to our untouchability. Has the British government done anything to remove it? The answer, of course, is no. It has not done anything. See, all the questions are framed in a way that their answers are implicit in the question itself. And then he talks about whenever you talk about any complex issues, if you can create a story or give an example of an anecdote, the way Babasaheb Ambedkar has given the anecdote here, very beautiful anecdote of a Chinese tailor who, when given an old coat as a pattern, produced with pride an exact replica, rents and patches and all. So the British have just replicated the what is called the pattern of the society before. In other words, they have replicated, only kept alive only the Brahminical structure of the society. That's what Babasaheb Ambedkar is saying here. So this is very important for us to understand how Babasaheb Ambedkar argues. When he argues, he gives the concrete example. In this case, he has given the example of a Chinese tailor, making his point very concrete, very clear to the audience. So now, who is going to read the next? Where are the volunteers who gave their names?
Um, Hello, sir. I would like to read next.
Yeah,
We do not accuse the British of indifference or want of sympathy. What we do find is that they are quite incompetent to tackle our problems. If the case was one of indifference, only it would have been a matter of small moment, and it would not have made such a profound change in our attitude. But what we have come to realize on a deeper analysis of the situation is that it is not merely a case of indifference. Rather, it is a case of sheer incompetence to undertake the task. The depressed classes find that the British government in India suffer from two very serious limitations. There is, first of all, an internal limitation which arises from the character, motives, and interest of those who are in power. It is not because they cannot help us in these things, but because it is against their characters, motives, and interests to do so. The second consideration that limits its authority is the mortal fear it has of external resistance. The government of India does not realize the necessity of removing the social evils which are eating into the vitals of the Indian society and have blighted the lives of the downtrodden classes for so many years. The government of India does realize that the landlords are squeezing the masses dry and the capitalists are not giving the laborers a living wage and decent conditions of work. Yet it is most painful thing that it has not dared to touch any of these evils. Why? Is it because it has no legal power to remove them? No, the reason why it does not intervene is because it is afraid that its intervention to amend the existing code of social and economic life will give rise to resistance. Of what good is such a government to anybody? Under a government paralyzed between two such limitations, much that goes to make life good must remain held up. We must have a government in which the men in power will give their undivided allegiance to the best interest of the country.
thank you, Arpit. Just 1 minute. Somebody has put the screen up. Just give me 1 moment. Don't play with the. Can you see the screen? Okay. Wait.
Sir, you can turn off the annotations from your side.
Yeah, I can do it, but I don't want to, this. Okay. So, thank you, Arpit. This is what is the how we analyze the speech. Now, here, Babasaheb Ambedkar, you see this his power of speech. He's going against the British in their own house, and he is what we can do. He is analyzing the power that be, and that power is of course very powerful, the British, and he is criticizing the power, which is very powerful, the British. And he's saying that the British government is not doing anything because it has two limitations. And he's telling them upfront that, this is his challenges upfront, telling them that these are the two things that you lack. One is that you have an internal limitation and you have an external limitation, saying that you do not have the character. He's questioning the character of the British. He's questioning their motive, and he's questioning their interest. And he says that, this is what you are doing. You are not doing anything for that because you are not going against your character, your motives, and your interest. And he talks about the external resistance in terms of the powerful forces of the time. You can understand the various pressure groups at the time, the business people, the lobbies, the Congress, and so on and so forth. And these are the two limitations. And he says that the government of India has not done anything to stop the landlords from squeezing the masses dry. You look at the vivid images. So whenever you speak, you have to create the vivid images so that people will understand what you are talking about. He's saying that the capitalists are not giving the laborers a living wage and decent condition. So he's saying, is it because it has no legal power to remove them? The British has certainly a lot of power to do the wrongs, that social evils, right, but they didn't do it. And Babasaheb is saying, of what good is such a government to anybody? So he's in a way saying that, you are not good enough. And you are paralyzed. You see the words that Babasaheb Ambedkar used, the way he structures the sentence, the way he appeals. He's now very extremely critical of the British. He says that such a government is paralyzed, and the must make life good, must remain held up. We must have a government in which the men in power will give their undivided allegiance to the best interest of the country. In other words, he's saying that the British are not acting in the best interest of the country. For that, you need the natives to come to the power and find the future for themselves. So next, who is going to read next?
Can I?
Yes, Rikita.
We must have a government in which men in power, knowing where obedience will end and resistance will begin, will not be afraid to amend the social and economic code of life, which the dictates of justice and expediency to so urgently call for. This role the British government will never be able to play. It is only a government which is of the people, for the people, and by the people that will make this possible. These are some of the questions raised by the depressed classes and the answers which, in their view, this question seems to carry. This is therefore the inevitable conclusion which the depressed classes have come to, namely that the bureaucratic government of India, with the best of motives, will remain powerless to effect any change so far as our particular grievances are concerned. We feel that nobody can remove our grievances as well as we can, and we cannot remove them unless we get political power in our own hands. No share of this political power can evidently come to us so long as the British government remain as it is. It is only in a Swaraj constitution that we stand any chance of getting the political power in our own hands, without which we cannot bring salvation to our people.
Thank you, Rikita. You see, now he's pushing his argument forth. He's analyzing the power. He's pushing his argument forth, and he's saying that we want people in power who knows where obedience will end and resistance will begin, and they will not be afraid to amend the social and economic code of life, which dictates of justice and expediency so urgently call for. And he says that the British can never do it. Only the government by the people, for the people, and of the people. That, in other words, the democracy, the true democracy, only has the liberating power to ameliorate the situation or the conditions of these depressed classes. And he says that we need a power in the hands of the Indians, and in that power we need a share in that political power, which will never come in the British government. So we need a constitution which is the constitution of the self rule, the Swaraj. And in that constitution, it's only we have the power, we have the chance to get the political power in our hands, without which we cannot bring salvation to people. So you see how deeper he is going in terms of analyzing the power, and he is situating the liberation of the scheduled caste within the democratization of India. And this is how he argues so beautifully, so clearly, so fundamentally. He brings his point out to the people. Now, keep the context in mind. This is what he's doing in front of the British in their own house. Next.
Sir, can I go next?
Yes, Akshay, please.
There is one thing, sir, to which I wish to draw your particular attention. It is this. I have not used the expression dominion status in placing before you the point of view of the depressed classes. I have avoided using it, not because I do not understand its implications, nor does the omission mean that the depressed classes object to India's attaining dominion status. My chief ground for not using it is that it does not convey the full content of what the depressed classes stand for. The depressed classes, while they stand for dominion status with safeguards, wish to lay all the emphasis they can on one question and one question alone. And that question is, how will Dominion India function? Where will the center of political power be? Who will have it? Will the depressed classes be heirs to it? These are the questions that form their chief concern. The depressed classes feel that they will get no shred of the political power unless the political machinery for the new constitution is of a special make. In the construction of that machine, certain hard facts of Indian social life must not be lost sight of. It must be recognized that Indian society is a gradation of castes forming an ascending scale of reverence and a descending scale of contempt, a system which gives no scope for the growth of that sentiment of equality and fraternity so essential for the democratic form of government. It must also be recognized that while the intelligentsia is a very important part of Indian society, it is drawn from its upper strata, and although it speaks in the name of the country and leads the political movement it has not shed the narrow particularism of the class from which it is drawn.
Thank you, Akshay. You see, now this is very important. You know, I would like you all to, look at the structure of the speech so that whenever you debate in the future, you know how to argue. And this is how Babasaheb Ambedkar is argue with the British government. Now he's talking about the democracy. He's talking about the transfer of power in the hands of the people, for the people, by the people, of the people. But within that, he's talking about why it is important for the depressed classes to have their own representation, because he's saying that Indian society is a society of graded inequality, and he uses his very famous phrase here: ascending scale of reverence and descending scale of content, a system which gives no scope for the growth of that sentiment of equality and fraternity, so essential for a democratic form of government. So he says that if we want a democratic form of government, we need a society that is imbued in equality and fraternity. He says that the Indian society is not like that. Though there is an intelligentsia in the Indian society, it is biased by their narrow particularism, and it is not able to shade their narrow particularism. So he's very clear as to what he wants out of it. He wants a new constitution. He wants a new political machinery that should include the hard facts of the social life. So you see, he has narrated. Now he's coming to the factual part of it as to how the transfer of power should be done, and where and how the power will be in the hands of the people. And this is what is important. Whenever you argue, your argument should be very clear. You should argue it logically. You should argue in a very concrete language. You argue in such a way that you do not create much of a offend. He is giving concessions to the intelligentsia. He's saying that there is an intellectual class, but he's also very critical of the intellectual class, saying that it is not able to shade his narrow particularism of the class from which it is drawn. He's referring to a particular community. For example, he's talking about the Brahmins. They might be well educated, but they have not shade their narrow particularism, which is based on the service for the country. In other words, service for the country means government of the people, by the people, for the people, which includes all the sections of the society within the framework of the government. So let's go further. I think we have 2-3 slides left. So who is going to read next?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Sumit.
In other words, what depressed classes wish to urge is that the political mechanism must take account of and must have a definite relationship to the psychology of society for which it is devised. Otherwise, you are likely to produce a constitution which, however symmetrically, we will be truncated one and a total misfit to the society for which it is designed. There is one point of which I should like to deal before I close this matter. We are often reminded that the problem of displaced classes is a social problem, and that its solution lies elsewhere than in politics. We take a strong exception to this point. We hold
Where
that,
are you reading from, Sumit?
uh,
Are you reading from
sir,
the?
I took a printout of that.
No, read from the screen. No, because there you are reading different things.
Okay, sorry, sir. In other words, that the depressed classes wish to urge this, that the political mechanism must take account of and must have a definite relation to the psychology of society for which it is devised. Otherwise, we are likely to produce a constitution which, however symmetrical, will be truncate one and a total misfit to society for which it is designed. In other words, that the repressed classes wish to urge is that the political mechanism must take account of and must have a definite relation to psychology of society for which it is devised. Otherwise, you are likely to produce a constitution which, however symmetrical, will be truncated one and a total misfit to society for which it is designed.
Sorry for that. This is, I don't, sorry for the repetition, but this is a very important paragraph, and you can understand how Babasaheb Ambedkar talks about the psychology. He talks about the constitution might be symmetrical, but it might be truncated, and it might not serve the better interest of the society. So let's read this long passage. Who is going to do that?
Sir, can I?
Yes, Siddhi, please.
There is one point with which I should like to deal before I close this matter. We are often reminded that the problem of the depressed classes is a social problem and that its solution lies elsewhere than in politics. We take strong exception to this view. We hold that the problem of the depressed classes will never be solved unless they get political power in their own hands. If this is true, and I do not think that the contrary can be maintained, then problem of depressed classes is, I submit, eminently a political problem and must be treated as such. We know that political power is passing from the British into the hands of those who wield such tremendous economic, social, and religious sway over our existence. We are willing that it may happen, though the idea of Swaraj recalls to the mind of many of us the tyrannies, oppressions, and injustices practiced upon us in the past, and fear of their recurrence under Swaraj. We are prepared to take the inevitable risk of the situation in the hope that we shall be installed in adequate proportion as the political sovereigns of the country along with our fellow countrymen.
Siddhi, you will read it, but let me gloss over this because this is very important. That now he's talking about the future, how the future will look. Because he knows he's saying that the power will transfer from the British to the Indians, and it will definitely go in the hands of those who are very strong and they heal tremendous economic, social, and religious way over our existence. So he's saying that in that particular situation where the power will be transferred to the powerful Indians, it will not have much bearing on the rights of the scheduled caste or the depressed classes. See, this is how logically you see how he builds up the case logically, how he comes to the point that he wants to advocate. And bear in mind, these are the skills that we need to acquire, as we have seen in the first session, that Babasaheb Ambedkar says that these are the skills. It's an art which we can master with the great efforts. And I'm going to go into how we are going to form our arguments, how we are going to think through the things the way Babasaheb Ambedkar did. And this is very important that you think before you talk. And this is how Babasaheb Ambedkar is doing it. Very beautifully structured speech, very clear, very sure about what he wants and how he wants it. It's a very clear speech. Lot to learn from this single speech. Go on, Siddhi, read further.
But we will consent to that on one condition, and that is the settlement of our problems is not left to time. I am afraid the depressed classes have waited too long for time to work its miracle. At every successive step taken by the British government to widen the scope of representative government, the depressed classes have been systematically left out. No thought has been given to their claim for political power. I protest with all the emphasis I can that we will not stand this any longer. The settlement of our problem must be a part of the general political statement and must not be left over to the shifting sands of the sympathy and goodwill of the rulers of the future. The reason why the depressed classes insist upon it are obvious. Every one of us knows that the man in possession is more powerful than the man who is out of possession. Every one of us also knows that those in possession of power seldom abdicate in favor of those who are out of it.
So you see, this is how he analyzes the power. Some scholars should look at how Babasaheb Ambedkar analyzes the power. But in this speech, it suffice here to say that how he built the case. He's saying that the powerful will never renunciate their power, while the dispossessed, if they do not have power, they can't do much. And that is the situation that we see every time. And therefore, he is talking about, if you want a fundamental change, if you want the civil rights in the country, it's very important to have power in the hands of the depressed classes when the power is transferred from the British to the Indians. So let's read it. Who is going to do it?
Can I? Sir, I'll read.
Yes, please.
We cannot therefore hope for the effectuation of the settlement of our social problem if we allow power to slip into the hands of those who stand to lose by settlement, unless we are to have another revolution to dethrone those whom we today help to ascend the throne of power and prestige. We prefer being despised for too anxious apprehensions than ruined by too confident a security, and I think it would be just and proper for us to insist that the best guarantee for the settlement of our problem is the adjustment of the political machine itself, so as to give us a hold on it and not the will of those who are contriving to be left in unfettered control of that machine.
Yes, go on reading.
What adjustment? Yes, sir. What adjustments of the political machine the depressed classes want for the safety and protection, I will place before the conference at the proper time. All I will say at the present moment is that although we want responsible government, we do not want a government that will only mean a change of masters. Let the legislature be fully and really representative if your executive is going to be fully responsible.
So you see, this is how, whenever you make a speech, or your position should be very clear as to what you want out of it. And here we are talking about the political rhetoric, political in the broader sense, in terms of a police where you want to build a democratic society. And Baba Ambedkar is very clear, and he's articulating it point very clearly. As I said, there's a lot to learn from, as from the point of view of a student of rhetoric, as to Babasaheb Ambedkar, how he is talking about what he wants. He's talking in a way, he's addressing the British, he's addressing the Indians, the very powerful Indians, he's addressing the princess, but he's bringing them all together on a single table or a platform. And at the same time, he's talking about the points that he wants to pursue. He says that we want a responsible government, but we do not want a government that will only mean a change of master. We don't just need the transfer of power from one hand to another. What we need, and he is going into a very deep concept here, let the legislature be fully and really representative if your executive is going to be fully responsible. So he's talking about a representative government, representative democracy. In other words, he's talking about the total democratization in the real sense of the word democracy. So you see, a lot of people wants to talk, debate, and argue, but if they do not know the elements of the speech. That's why Baba Ambedkar says that we have to train ourselves as to how we are going to make a speech, how we are going to argue, how we are going to debate, how we are going to speak, and how we are going to negotiate. For that you need a lot of training. It's not something that you are born with. So reading such kind of a speech, speeches give us a very tremendous sort of a power through the training of understanding the language, how to articulate our views, how to talk about what we want very clearly. And this is what Baba Ambedkar is doing. He says that we want a responsible government, and only the representative government is responsible government. That is the point he makes. So let's read it.
Sir, can I read?
Yeah. Arnav, please.
I am sorry, Mr. President. I had to speak in such plain words, but I saw no help. The depressed classes have had no friend. The government has all along used them only as an excuse for its continued existence. The Hindus claim them only to deny them, or better still, to appropriate rights. The Mohammedans refuse to recognize their separate existence because they fear that their privileges may be curtailed by the admission of a rival. Depressed by the government, suppressed by the Hindu, and disregarded by the Muslim, we are left in a most intolerable position of utter helplessness, to which I am sure there is no parallel and to which I was bound to call attention.
Wait 1 minute,
Regarding
Arnav. Wait 1 minute. You see how he talks about now the depressed classes, and he's stating the clear picture. He says that we have no friends, and he's saying that the government has only used us. They have done nothing for us. And he talks about what Hindu does. They claim that we belong to them, but at the same time they deny us appropriate rights. The Mohammedans, the Muslim, refuse to recognize our separate existence because they fear that their privileges may be curtailed by the admission of a rival. So you see, that was the rallying point of the Muslims. They said that the Hindus are not, in proportion in that population. They claim first time in the history that the untouchables are not the Hindus, and that's how the census 1911 separate the scheduled caste from the Hindus. And you see, there are the very beautiful use of the words. See, that's what you have to bear in mind: how to use the words, how to articulate the facts, through the words. He says, depressed by the government, suppressed by the Hindus, and disregarded by the Muslims. You see, in a single sentence, he is talking about the situation of the deprived classes and how they are looked upon, how they are used by the other classes, like the The government depresses them, the Hindus suppress them, and the Muslims disregarding. And therefore, they are in a helpless situation, utter helplessness. And he says that I was bound to call your attention to that because I'm sure there is no parallel to which I was bound to call the attention. You see, this is how you highlight your point through the language, through the use of the particular phraseology and the sentences. So go on reading further.
Yes, sir. Regarding the other question, which is set down for discussion, I am sorry it was decided to tag it onto a general debate. Its importance deserved a session for itself. No justice can be done to it in a passing reference. The subject is one in which the depressed classes are deeply concerned and they regard it as a very vital question. As members to a minority, we look to the central government to act as a powerful curb on the provincial majority to save the minorities from the misrule of the majority. As an Indian interested in the growth of an Indian nationalism, I must make it plain that I am a strong believer in the unitary form of government, and the thought of disturbing it, I must confess, does not please me very much. This unitary government has been the most potent influence in the building up of the Indian nation.
Thank you, Arno. You see, this is how you bring these two ideas in together. He's talking about the unitary government. He's talking about the Indian nation. He's talking about building up India as a country. But he's also saying that you cannot build a country if you have a provincial majority to rule over the minorities, the misrule of the majority. So very clear. This is very clearly articulate speech. It's a very difficult, difficult audience. He's making very difficult points. He's making very vital points as well. And he's also educating the people. He's making them think that if you are thinking about the country, you cannot but think about the question of the deprived classes, depressed classes. And at the same time, as I have shown you, that he was a very great patriot of a higher sterling. And he has stated it time and again. But his patriotism or the real patriotism is all about people. It's not about land. It's about people as to what you are doing with the citizen of this country. So you want an unitary government, but within that government, if there is no representation, that government won't be responsible government. And if the government is not responsible, it will be the misrule of the majority. The situation that exactly parallels with what is happening in this country today. So next.
Sir, I will go next.
Yeah, Rupa, please.
That process of unification, which has been the result of unified system of government, has not been completed, and I should be lauded to withdraw this most powerful stimulus in the formative period and before it has worked out its end. However, the question in the form in which it is placed is only an academic question, and I shall be prepared to consider a federal form if it can be shown that in it local autonomy is not inconsistent with central unity. Sir, all that I as representative of the depressed classes need say on their behalf, I have said, may I crave your indulgence to permit me as an Indian to say a word or two generally on the situation, which we have to meet. So much has been said regarding its gravity that I shall not venture to add a word more to it, although I am no silent spectre of the movement. What I am anxious about is to feel whether we are proceeding no right lines in evolving our solution. What that solution should be rests entirely upon the view that British delegates choose to take. Addressing myself to them, I will say whether you will meet situation by conciliation or by applying the iron heel must be a matter for your judgment, for the responsibility is entirely yours. To such of you as are particularly to the cause of force and belief that a regime of letters decatch and the Bastille will easy the situation. Let me recall the memorable words of the greatest teacher of political philosopher Emile Burke, This is what he said to the British nation when it was faced with the problem of dealing with the American colonials.
See, thank you, Rupa. This is very important. He is talking about the process of unification of India because, as I told you, there were 11 British provinces and there were more than 560 princely states. So he's talking about the unitary government. He's talking about the Union of India. He's talking about the unitary form of the government. And he says that, the question in the form in which it is placed is only an academic question. And Babasaheb Ambedkar was a very high caliber academician, as we know that he has the two doctoral degrees, research degrees from the best universities abroad. And he is making, he's talking about, the very practical issues here. And you see, this is how is the orator or the rhetor does. He understands the minds of the people and he exactly talks in their context. He's playing on their own field, but, trying to win the game for himself. And this is what is happening in this paragraph. He's talking about Edmund Burke. Now, some of you who might be knowing the history about the French Revolution, where there was a bloody transfer of power. The king was overthrown, killed, and a lot of violence took place in the French Revolution. The great British philosopher Edmund Burke was against the what is called the French Revolution. He said that we cannot win by force certain things, and he was a very strong advocate of reconciliation during the American Revolution, which was against the British government. And he's invoking the Edmund Burke's political philosophy here because you see the British were very wary of the French Revolution because they thought that any bloody overthrow of the government is not in the favor of the people at large. And we call today the philosophy of Edmund Burke the conservative philosophy, and the Thomas Paine's philosophy as a liberal philosophy. And the beauty of Babasaheb Ambedkar is that he can draw in from both the sources. He can draw in from the conservative like Edmund Burke, who is against revolution, and he's also drawing in from Thomas Paine, one of the influences of Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, a great revolutionist who played an important role in the American Revolution. So, in the end, Babasaheb Ambedkar is for reconciliation. He is for the peace. He is for the negotiated peace, as we have seen in the first session, and he is for the peaceful change in the society. He doesn't advocate violence. He doesn't advocate, a tremendous use of the force. He advocates rational, calculated use of the force, but not the use of the force forever. And I think this is what he's trying to tell the British, that they have to go back to the political philosophy of their greatest teacher, Edmund Burke. And see, this example itself is so convincing for the British to understand from where Babasaheb Ambedkar is arriving at when he's talking about his solution to the problem. So let's go next.
So can I go?
Yes,
Sir, can I go?
Okay, Kushal, you can go, and then there is a last slide.
The use of force alone is but temporary. It may endure for a moment, but it does not remove the necessity of subduing again. A nation is not governed which is perpetually to be conquered. The next objection to force is its uncertainty. Terror is not always the effect of force, and an armament is not a victory. If you do not succeed, you are without resource for conciliation failing. Force remains, but force failing, no further hope of reconciliation is left. Power and authority are sometimes bought by kindness, but they can never be begged as alms by an impoverished and defeated violence. A further objection to force is that you impair the object by your very endeavors to preserve it. The thing you fought for, to wit, the loyalty of the people, is not the thing you recover, but depreciated, sunk, wasted, and consumed in the contest.
Wait a minute, Kushal. You see, this is what you have seen in the first speech. In the 1946 Constitutional Assembly speech, he also cites Edmund Burke, and he cites the same thing. So you see, Babasaheb Ambedkar is all about reconciliation, negotiation, peaceful transformation. He's against force. He wants force to be used for a particular time and period. He's not trying, he never advocates the full-blown use of the violence. He's very much opposed to the force. He's about, persuasion. This is what shows the, Babasaheb's great adherence to the power of persuasion. And we have seen his power of persuasion as to how he changed the destiny of the country, how he He changed the destiny of the deprived classes. So Kushal, read the paragraph.
The worth and efficacy of this advice you all knew. You did not listen to it and you lost the great continent of America. You followed it. To the lasting good of yourself and the rest of the dominions that you are with, are with you. To such of you as are willing to adopt a policy of conciliation, I should like to say one thing. There seems to be a prevalent an impression that the delegates are called here to argue for and against a case of dominion status, and that the grant of dominion status will be dependent upon which side is the victor in this battle of wits. With due deference to all who are sharpening their wits, I submit that there can be no greater mistake than to make the formula of logic govern, so leave an issue.
See, this is what he is telling to British upfront on their face. He's saying that because of your bad attitude, because you did not listen to Edmund Burke and reconciliation, he's saying that you lost the great continent of America. Now, if you are talking to the power in such a manner, you need to be very audacious. And you see Babasaheb Ambedkar fearlessness, his boldness to tell British on their front, on their face, that why you lost the great continent of America, because you did not listen to this great sage Edmund Burke. You did not talk about the reconciliation. And he's saying that to such of you as are willing to adopt a policy of reconciliation, I should like to say one thing. There seems to be prevalent an impression that the delegates are called here to argue for and against a dominion status. So dominion status means the British will hold the power, but Indians will rule it. And he's saying that the grant of dominion status will be dependent upon which side is the victor in the battle of wits. So in the arguments, whoever will win, they will get the fruits of the victory. He's saying that, don't look at it like that. He's saying that with due deference to all who are sharpening their wits, I submit that there can be no greater mistake than to make the formula of logic govern to live an issue. So he's saying that such a issue cannot be governed by the formula of logic, by the wit or the intelligence. And he always talks about wisdom. He always talks about pragmatism, which will lead people to a certain goal. So this is the last. Who would like to finish?
Sir, can I?
Yes, Siddhi.
I have no quarrel with logic and logicians, but I warn them against the disaster that is bound to follow if they are not careful in the selection of the premises they choose to adopt for their deductions. It is all a matter of temper whether you will abide by the fall of your logic or whether you will refute it, as Dr. Johnson did the paradoxes of Berkeley by trampling them under his feet. I am afraid it is not sufficiently realized that in the present temper of the country, no constitution will be workable which is not acceptable to the majority of the people. The time when you were to choose and India was to accept is gone, never to return. Let the consent of the people and not the accident of logic be the touchstone of your new constitution if you desire that it should be worked.
So thank you, Siddhi. You see, this is the last paragraph, the conclusion of the speech. And this is a lesson itself in speaking. So you see, you use logic, you use logicians, you use argument. And this Babasaheb Ambedkar has used a lot of rhetorical tools in his speech to convince people. But in the end, he says that it cannot be solved by the logic and the wit. I have no quarrel with logic and logician. But he says that I warn you against the disaster that is bound to follow if they are not careful in selection of the premises. So you see, in the argument, there are two ways, to argue. One is the deductive logic and one is inductive logic. And here he's talking about deduction. You see, so when you deduce something, you have to have the true premises. I don't want to go into the theory of logic, but unless the premises are true, the conclusion cannot be true. So whatever the way you are arguing your case, it has to be argued on the premises which are selected properly and which are true. Then only your conclusion will be true. If your premise is false, your conclusion will be always false. And he's saying that, we have to choose our premises very clearly. And Babasaheb Ambedkar has chosen his very premises very clearly when he has argued the case for India's democracy and the rights of the depressed section in that. And it's a small lesson, small package of deductive reasoning. And he talks about logic, but he says that if there is a paradox, it has to be proved with concrete example. And this is what is very important. Two lines of the great wit that Baba Ambedkar has put before the audience here. The great Berkeley, he's called idealist, whose theory was that everything is mind. And because he says that everything is mind made. Dr. Johnson has said that you kick your foot against a stone and tell me whether the pain that you suffer is only mind made. So you see, this is what Baba Ambedkar is saying. He's talking about, practical things, not just wits or the arguments. He's talking about the practical things. And he's saying whether you will refute it as Dr. Johnson did the paradoxes of Berkeley by trampling them under his feet. You see, so very beautiful. It's a very high level use of the language. The condensing the whole episode of Dr. Johnson and Berkeleyan philosophy, by trampling them under his feet. So if you trample your feet on any stone, you're going to bound to feel the pain if your feet is cut or if you are hurt. So he's challenging the Berkeley's logic that everything is in the mind. And he says that no constitution will be workable which is not acceptable to the majority of the people. So he says, he's making this point that if the constitution is not acceptable to the deprived classes, this constitution is not going to work. And that was one of the point that Baba Ambedkar became the part of the Constituent Assembly, because that's how the Congress, coming constitution was made, acceptable by all. So he says, let the consent of the people, not the accident of logic, be the touchstone of your new constitution if you desire that it should be worked. This is how Baba Ambedkar ends his speech. Let's look at the impact of the speech. This was the first speech in the roundtable conferences. Baba Ambedkar has intervened a lot in the constituent, in the roundtable conferences. He got a lot of rights for the scheduled caste in that. So he says his speech has made a tremendous impact on the press. The Indian Daily Mail described this speech as one of the finest bits of oratory during the whole conference. So this speech of Baba Ambedkar was lauded as one of the finest bits of oratory during the whole conference. The reporter of the Indian Daily Mail observed, Dr. Ambedkar pointed out that he had a mandate to see that no responsible government was established unless it was at the same time accompanied by a truly representative government. He voiced a fear that the proposed form of the government would be one of the masses by the classes, and his protest found much echoing sympathy in the Labour and Liberal parties of the Great Britain. So the two parties, the party in power and the opposition party, they both liked the speech of Baba Ambedkar. Sayajirao Gaikwad, the benefactor of Baba Ambedkar, was moved to tears when he listened to this speech. And he was so extremely pleased with Baba Ambedkar that he returned to his kingly residence in London, full of admiration, satisfaction, and high appreciation. With the joyful tears in his eyes, he told his princely wife that their efforts and the money they had spent on the speaker of the day were all realized. You see, this is how Sayaji Maharaj was impacted by the speech of Baba Ambedkar. It was an achievement, he said, a glorious success. He invited Baba Ambedkar to a special dinner hosted by him in London to his choice friends. And in that, Baba Ambedkar also made a small speech asking for money for his printing press. And Maharaja Sayajirao Maharaj mobilized funds for buying a printing press for Baba Ambedkar. So, impact on the British Parliament. Lord Sydenham and O'Dwyer, who were very critical of Baba Ambedkar in the Spectator newspaper, they were fully convinced after this speech that Baba Ambedkar was a nationalist. And the first session of the RTC was adjourned, and on 19 January 1931, after 1 month, followed by debate on India in the House of Commons. And this is what the parliamentarian said in the House. Isaac Foot, the member of the House, referred to the disabilities of the untouchables. He said, if we do not establish safeguards for their protection, their blood may cry out against us. This is the power of Babasaheb's speech. If I had any advice to give a future governors, it will be, let your main concern be for these people. They may be defenseless now, but one day they will be strong. As there is justice upon the earth, there is no bank that can keep back forever the accumulated sufferings of these people. The real test of the progress of India 20 years hence will be, what have you done for these people? You see, this is the impact of Baba Ambedkar on the leaders, on the member of parliaments of the British Parliament. And Baba Ambedkar's own assessment of his work in there, in his letter to his secretary Shivtarkar, he said that Baba Ambedkar was confident that he had laid the foundation of the self-government of India. You see, he knows what he's doing. Baba Ambedkar knows what he's doing. And he's saying that I have laid the foundation of the self-government for India. And he says that viewed in this light, the conference was success, but he's also critical. You see how critical he is, and he uses the image very beautifully. He says, viewed from another angle, he observed that the foundation had more sand than mortar. Hence, the foundation was not strong enough. But so far as the rights of the depressed classes were concerned, it was a tremendous success. So that is what he's doing. So, I'm just going to prepare a stage for the third session, which is going to be very interesting, very entertaining. The debate between Gandhi and Babasaheb Ambedkar. As I told you, Gandhi didn't go for the first roundtable conference, and Babasaheb Ambedkar was great success. He got whatever he wanted because of his power of persuasion. And you see, Babasaheb Ambedkar was appointed as the Federal Structure Committee member of it's a very powerful committee of the time. And he was interviewed by the representative of the Times of India. He made a small statement. This is the last slide, but one slide. The roundtable conference is, to my mind, a great trump of statesmanship. It would be an idle pretense to say that there are no defects in the constitution as outlined by the conference, but in my opinion, they are not of a vital character. Even assuming the contrary to the truth, there is a time and opportunity for all those who believe in a peaceful solution of the Indian problem to step in and improve the framework. My greatest disappointment arises from the fact that the constitution as outlined by the conference is most undemocratic in as much as it is based on very restricted franchise. So the constitution that was coming to forth, it has not given the adult franchise, not right to vote for all, only limited franchisee. And he says now he's critical of Gandhi. It is a great pity that Mr. Gandhi, judging from the reports of his pronouncement on the results of the conference, seems to have entirely lost sight of this aspect of the constitution and is laying stress on elements which I venture to think are the most trivial and most transient. This is his critique of Gandhi. He says that he's focusing his energy on the unnecessarily things, on the trivial and transient things. Before this, Babasaheb Ambedkar and Gandhi has not met. I'm going to show you how they met, how, who sent the letter to whom, and, what happened in those meetings, and how Babasaheb Ambedkar negotiated. So those of us who represented the depressed classes and the labor fought for adult suffrage, and although we failed, because all other parties played false to their position as signatories to the Nehru report. Babasaheb Ambedkar was very critical of the Nehru report because it doesn't raise the point which are supposed to be raised for the democratization of the country. It didn't include anything to do with the deprived classes or the displaced classes. And I, for one, have been living in the hope that when Mr. Gandhi comes to lay down his terms of settlement, he will see to it that the constitution to which he will be a party will be thoroughly democratic one. So you see how he is going for democracy. If Mr. Gandhi fails us in our efforts to secure political rights, power to the common man and women in India, I would not hesitate to call his act as the greatest betrayal of the trust and his campaign of civil disobedience as the worst exploitation of the masses for the services of the classes. In view of the fact that Mr. Gandhi's political philosophy is not known to many, it may be advisable for those leaders of the masses who count themselves among his followers and the disciples to ask from him a declaration of his views on the question of adult suffrage before they give him any further support in the campaign of civil disobedience. These are very prophetic words. And this stages sets the stage for a battle of negotiation between Babasaheb Ambedkar and Gandhi, which we are going to study in the third session. So I will stop here and we will open the class for 10 minutes discussion or anything that you would like to discuss.
Sir, thank you so much for reliving the moments what Babasaheb done in the Constitution. In the roundtable conferences, and it was really a great lecture as well as a means experience to reliving the moments, and particularly your means the last sites, the newspaper slides, and your representative was very pleasant, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sumit. Anybody has anything to say before we end today?
Yeah, Nitin, yeah. So thank you for this session. It was beautiful. In the initial slides itself, I had tears. The powerful words that Baba Sahib uses and the way the flow of the topic it's so impressive. So thank you for taking this session. Pretty impressive. And the way you conducted, the way you explained the flow, because I do not know much about history, but the way you would kind of connected the dots is beautiful. I hope this reaches out to more number of people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nitin. Thank you, Nitin. You see, some of the youngsters are very anxious to debate. My conviction is that we have a debating societies, soon to follow. But before that, learn the basic art, basic elements of rhetoric. These are the things that we all need to master, and without having this training as to how you are going to argue, how you are going to use, when you are going to use logos, logic, when you are going to use emotions, pathos, when you are going to use the ethos, the character, and the timing, the knowledge, how you structure the way you speak. This is very important. And this is how Babasaheb Ambedkar gives us a training. As I told you, at the end of his life, he wanted to conduct a special course for the students of the median college or the training school for the entering into politics about elements of oratory, how to make a speech is very critical. And I think with engagement with this kind of a material, it's also training for us. I look at these courses as a kind of a training to our minds as to how we can articulate, how we can talk, how we can make our points across, how we can persuade the other people, how we can, in other words, lead to reconciliation. If the speech fails, if the communications fails, it leads to violence. And violence is not in the interest of anybody, as Babasaheb Ambedkar has been arguing time and again. So, these are very important classes. I urge youngsters to go through the material very carefully, train themselves. We'll certainly have the, debating classes in the future. I don't know how they are going to turn up. Maybe some of you can take the responsibility of that. But, we are going to, learn a lot about, public speaking in the course of our remaining 4 sessions. So before we conclude, anybody has any final comment?
Would this be on YouTube as well?
Yeah. We are always placing these videos on the YouTube, and they are available in our groups also.
So
Thank
I
you.
have a question.
Somebody has a question. Let's look at the question. Who has a question?
Sir, me, it's Trishita.
Yes, Trishita.
So, can you please just explain this line again that this untouchable class are depressed by the government and suppressed by the Hindus? These are the phrases I have understand, but how they are disregarded by the Muslim? Can you
Yeah,
just
very
please?
good. Very good, Trishita. I see this is very interesting that, when there was a transfer of power that was taking place after 1917. But before that, the political reforms began in India. And the upper caste Hindus were trying to argue that the population of Hindus is so much, and they were including the untouchables in that. So what Muslims did, Muslims argued in the census 1909 onwards that the untouchables are not Hindus because they eat beef, they do not take the mantras from the Brahmins, and they were questionnaire, which separated the untouchables from the Hindus. And when it comes to the power in the government, the Muslims didn't consider most of the times the scheduled caste as a third party, and they disregarded the interest of the scheduled caste totally and completely. They were only focusing on what is called the two nation theory, that they do not form the part of the Hindu nation or the Indian nation. Their nationalism is separate. So they completely disregarded. Had they Babasaheb Ambedkar wanted to bring all these elements together, he wanted to bring Periyar and Jinnah together to form a political front against the high caste dominated Brahman Baniya Congress, but it failed. So because they completely disregarded by the Muslims. Had it not had the Muslims taken untouchables together or other sections, India might have not seen the partition, because they would have formed a common front, so that Indian reality, the subcontinent reality would be very different. They were totally focused on their political power. They were getting more than what they were meant to get, at the cost of disregard of the untouchables. So that's a bigger question, Trishita. But you get the sense of what I'm talking about, right?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So before we go further, I would like to request you to go through this material time and again, and look at these speeches, so that they will act as a training material. We will have more of you know this particular phrases coming in the future, as about how Babasaheb Ambedkar negotiated with the Muslims, how he negotiated with Congress, how Congress negotiated with Muslims, and how all of the sections negotiated with the British. This is a very interesting story that we are going to study in the third session. So thank you so much all for joining in, and see you in the next session.
Mangesh, I have one request.
Sachin.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Recently, I'm in touch with one of the institute called Marji. What they are doing, they are preparing some peoples to stand out as an barefoot lawyers. So I have shared this link with them, and they have requested, can we have this Marathi version of it? So I guess if
Marathi
we
version of what?
the conversation, the way we are taking this training of public speaking.
Yeah. Definitely, this material is not copyrighted. You can use this material in any language, anywhere.
Okay. So yeah.
Okay.
So I want to share with them. That's why I want to understand, like, if I have to convert this, are there any copyrights or something like that?
No. You can do it very easily. It's very easy to
That
do.
will- Yeah, this will help them to, like, when they are speaking like a lawyer, they should understand how
Yeah.
they uh, do the conversation with the mob as well as the police or lawyer something. So
Yeah.
help them to be a public speaker.
Yeah. I think this is the course that will be used by everybody.
Oh.
It's not just us. Anybody can use it.
Even I have asked them to join, maybe some of the joining from the next week.
Yeah. Good.
Every Saturday, Sunday, right? Or how is
Yes.
it?
Every Saturday morning, 10 o'clock.
Okay. Yeah, great.
Thank you, Sachin. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, okay, see you in the next session. Thank you all for joining in.